Good morning to my fellow panelists and to the moderator, Ms. Folger, to my ministerial colleagues, to the Cabinet Secretary, the Deputy Head of the Civil Service, Ms. Judith Holbein, to members of the Chamber of Commerce Executive and those who are attending. A few points I'd like to make. First, everyone should want to see a sustainable public finance framework. This requires a balance between competing interests, sustaining an acceptable level of service delivery as a government, also addressing some of the unmet needs, but doing it in a realistic and rational manner. In December of last year, following on from the budget of last year, when I articulated that we would be moving towards open budget and the medium-term economic framework, in December there was the publication of the pre-budget report, a fairly thick and robust document, but it articulated issues which should therefore have made Budget 2012 no surprise for anyone. Just let's reflect briefly on where we were and where we are. In 2010-11 actuals, current account spending, excluding debt service, was about 1.04 billion. Also, from that, during 2011-12, that was reduced by about 69 million, so it was about 970 million on current account. The capital account spending had been about 124 million, and that too was reduced to just over 60 million. So we reduced spending by about 124 million. Decision in 2012 was not to do further harm to the economy, because what we want to see is economic activity generated, so we kept the numbers relatively flat. Not any major increases or decreases, though we certainly suspended the injection into the PSSF of 31 million. Over the years, we have made extraordinary contributions to the PSSF of 80 plus, about 87 million. So that's the context. If you look at Budget 2012, three main issues to bear in mind. The economic backstop provided by continuing to sustain a level of concessions to the retail, the hotel, and the restaurant sector. From the past, that means you start with a debt in terms of those monies paid of about 98 million. You're also foregoing this year revenue that could have been generated from those sectors of at least 21 million. The pin to stick in the room is the fact that this is unsustainable. And while the government can provide a helping hand and a crutch to distressed sectors, it certainly can't be an automatic guarantee going forward or a continuation. That's point one on that issue. Point two is the fact that we have to look to generate additional economic activity, create increased revenue, and seek to facilitate an environment where there can be more jobs created. You've heard that from Mr. Everson and also Mr. Keynes. And thirdly, as I started off, as I now end as I began, public finance has to be sustainable. That's why I articulated and am moving towards and instituting the medium-term economic framework. That means you are looking at your position, not just from a year-to-year basis in terms of current account. Obviously, you also always did that on the capital account, but it's looking at how one can have a sustainable framework and also get oneself and the country back on in terms of in surplus. And that's why you're looking across the years. That's what we're doing, and we intend to follow through. Thank you.
thank you all for that reception of our various panelists' opening remarks. Much appreciated. We have around 15 questions here that have been submitted during the breakfast time. As you might imagine, several of them are on common themes. So what I've done is, rather than repeating 15, I'll try and get the themes together and pick up a couple of questions. So the wording may not appear exactly as you wrote it, but I'm trying to pick up everyone's thoughts. As you would imagine, there's a lot of questions on the deficit. And Madam Premier specifically asked me this morning not to have her answer all the questions, but rather we have a little bit of a debate amongst our panels. So let me start with the first question, which is the ratio of debt to GDP. Some people feel that the ratio of debt to GDP is a good metric for Bermuda because it compares favorably for other developed countries. Others think that it's not. Is it really an effective measure for an economy as unique as ours? So we're fortunate enough to have an economist on our panel. Peter, could I ask you to give some thoughts on GDP to GDP ratios generally?
Sure. As anybody would know, smaller debt is better than bigger debt, so a small number is a good number. For Bermuda, the Department of Statistics, like all of the civil service, have good standards, and they follow internationally accepted practice. But Bermuda's economy, as with other smaller nation states, doesn't really quite fit in well with the larger countries. Another country which we always used to meet up at the top of the league table for GDP per capita was Luxembourg. Luxembourg has many similarities to Bermuda, a small country with a large financial services sector and large numbers of foreigners working in that financial services sector owned by foreigners. Here, we know that the international business by definition is owned by foreigners. In Bermuda, we capture the data for GDP just as Canada, the US, the UK does.